You've just found the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Here, you'll discover the people and places that make Montana like no other place in the world. If you love to fish, hunt, or just enjoy creating your own adventure in the outdoors, you have come to the right place. The Montana Outdoor Podcast is brought to you by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer, home of Boss Snowplows and Accessories, and Diamond Sea Trailers and Accessories. Go to rmtte.com and see everything they have waiting for you online, or just come by 5680 Expressway in Missoula, and by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, delivering the highest quality lumber, paneling, flooring, and reclaimed wood products anywhere in North America. Let them guide you through the woods at their showroom in Missoula on Highway 93 South or at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, let's go discover Montana's great outdoors with your host, Downrigger Dale. Have a great show, buddy. Can't wait to hear it.
Hey, thanks a lot, Roger. And as Roger just said, I am Downrigger Dale with the Montana Outdoor Podcast, and welcome back into the Montana Outdoor Podcast studios. And we got another great podcast for you. As promised, I'm continuing my series of ice fishing previews, give you folks out there a good idea of some great places to go and what you can chase down when you get there, and get some really good advice from the top experts in the state, if not the country, that you'll be able to learn a lot from. So we're going to get into that. But first, I want to welcome some of those favorite groups of ours that have been with us from the beginning or close to the beginning that listen and watch this podcast. First of all, our active military all around the world. We are so honored that at bases all around this big rubber ball we sit on, we have active military members that are able to access this podcast and watch. Sometimes they watch it recorded because obviously they're doing a lot of work for all of us. So we thank you all for listening and watching. We pray for your safety and thanks for what you do. Also, we have a lot of veterans who watch and listen here in the great state of Montana, as well as around the country. And thank you for your service too. We honor what you have done. We wouldn't be here doing what we're doing without you. So thank you. And also for any of you that are not stateside and you would like me to do a little shout out to family members here at home or any of that, feel free to just shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to do that. So I hope this podcast brings you a little bit of home back to wherever you are. Now, other things that our promotions department always wants me to do, don't quite understand all the lingo, but I say it. And that is, please like, share, and subscribe to our podcast. That helps us out a lot. So if you wouldn't mind, do that. We really would appreciate that. All right, now let's get into what we're going to be talking about here. You will hear a very familiar voice coming up next. If you're watching, you may have seen him especially on MontanaOutdoor.com, because he does a great report every week about what fishing is like and going on around the Fort Peck area. And that's Don Wilkins. He is an incredible fishing guide, one of the top fishing guides, without a doubt, in Montana, if not the country. And he's always great about giving us great advice. And boy, I've gotten a lot of your emails saying, hey, where is it frozen yet? And all that. So, Brother Don, thank you so much for coming on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Good to have you back.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Don, I guess I'll ask that first question. Are you seeing any parts of Fort Peck Reservoir covered with ice or starting to form yet?
Well, we took a drive down to the Nelson Creek area, and there's some ice down there, but there's not very much water. So we're probably going to end up waiting for it to start freezing a little bit further north towards Wire Creek before we start getting out there. So hopefully next weekend we'll go up and do some sneaking around and maybe get a few tip-ups in. Yeah,
that I'll tell you, people are excited for it. And why not? You know, if you've never ice fished before, folks, Montana's winters can be kind of long. It's a good sport to pick up if you've never done it, because it is a fun way to spend the winter. And you have a lot of fun. A lot of people are starting to do it. I think it's a very fast-growing sport. Now, since we started this podcast, especially when we went to video podcasts, Don, man, did we get a lot more people that have joined in on this podcast. So some of them may not know you. So if you don't mind, just maybe a little brief description of who you are, what you do, and where you're from, if you don't mind, sir.
Sure. So I grew up in Northwest Montana. I grew up in Libby. Spent most of my time up there, Libby and Kalispell area, and I worked out in the woods logging and in the lumber mills up there for 20 plus years, and took a job for UPS and transferred out of the Flathead. It ended up over in eastern Montana and been here ever since. Found Fort Peck Lake and decided I'm just going to stay here and fish. So we ended up here.
It's an amazing fishery for sure. In fact, I remember when I would get out there with the captain, we'd some of those early mornings chasing the king salmon out there, and here we'd see Don already out, and you were hitting the water before you'd start your route at UPS.
Yeah.
So you're a dedicated fisherman for sure. When is it that you decided, you know what, I'm gonna get into guiding full time? When did that hit?
I think it was probably about 4 years ago. It was a friend of mine. We were just talking about fishing, and he made the suggestion that, as much as I'm out there, he said maybe you should try and find a way to make some money while you're doing it. And there was an opportunity with the guys at the Lake Ridge to start doing some guiding ice fishing, and just kind of took off from there, to be honest with you. And it's come together a lot faster than I thought, and I'm very grateful for all the people that have helped me get to where it is now.
Yeah, Lake Ridge Lodging and Bait Shop. We talk about them a lot on our radio program, the Montana Outdoor Radio Show, which is heard on 30 stations all across Montana. If they listen to it on the radio, and then of course online, you can watch it and listen to it as well. So I guess that would be one place if folks want to get in touch with you, they could go through Lake Ridge. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And we'll get all of the contact information for Don. So if you have questions for him, you can shoot him an email through one of those outlets, and I'll put that in the podcast description and all that. We'll talk about it later too. So, Don, we're working on getting ice forming out on Fort Peck, and 11 below that helps. But now in a water body as big as Fort Peck, it's not just temperature that helps ice form. The lake has to stay kind of calm too, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Wind is always the thing that probably makes it take longer than some other places to get some ice forming. The dry arm area, that's why it usually freezes quicker. It's shallower and a little more protected. So we can usually get started down there pretty quick, and we just work our way up out of the dry arm as the ice moves north.
Mm-hmm. And the great thing about Fort Peck, one of the reasons I love to fish that water, that body of water, is one, it's the largest body of water in the state of Montana. It is a huge reservoir. What is it, 134 miles long? Something like that?
Probably, yeah. I'm not sure about the exact thing, but I think I hear a lot that it has more mileage than or more shoreline than the state of California. So it's pretty big.
That is correct. Yeah, that is a real interesting stat. But yeah, by quite a ways, it has more shoreline than the state of California. So very large reservoir. And as far as the species go, my goodness, you're going to catch something if you get to know the reservoir well. So it is a really good place to do that. Now, one of the things that always amazes me about it, Don, especially as a fishing guide, Fort Peck can kind of be considered a pretty remote place. As compared to, say, a Flathead Lake or the reservoir up there by Libby, where you're from, or any of those places where, you're fairly close to major airports and, highways and all that. Fort Peck's fairly remote. It's, very close to Glasgow, one of my favorite towns in the state of Montana, but yet you still have a lot of people that want to get out on the lake. Are you noticing that we're seeing, especially with ice fishing, we're seeing that grow even more as of course the lake gets a little more notoriety?
Yeah, I think, and I think the remoteness of it is some of the draw to the place. You're talking about ice fishing, people that ice fish, they're usually a pretty hardy bunch of people, so the thought of getting out and maybe not running into too many people for 2 or 3 days at a time is pretty appealing. And like you, alluded to with, up around the Flathead area, where those places are really starting to, there's a pretty good population growth there. So people like to come to Fort Peck, and there's a lot of room to roam around, and you don't see very many people.
Yeah. Yeah. I rarely have ever heard people say there's just too much overcrowding up here when people are fishing. I mean, there's just so much water. Let's talk about the species of fish that we can go after now, and especially as it relates to trying to fish through the ice. Talk about that. What are the different species we could catch ice fishing on Fort Peck Reservoir?
Well, you can catch the lake trout, obviously, walleye, pike. We'll catch some ling occasionally. We catch some smallmouth bass. And that's probably the top ones there that you're running into for the most part. Every once in a while, you'll pull up a catfish or something like that. But that's probably mostly through the ice what you're going to get. And most of those species, including the lake trout, are all caught on tip-ups. So that's where a lot of that comes from. And you'll occasionally bump into the occasional king salmon out there, and that's like the unicorn through the ice out there, I think. So it's pretty special when you get to pull one of them up through the ice.
Yeah, the king salmon. In fact, our last podcast we just did talks all about the king salmon. If you haven't seen that podcast, I'm going to put a link to it, folks. You should watch it because it's really interesting how a king salmon goes from a tiny little egg all the way through going back into Fort Peck Reservoir. And the reason that gets so interesting is they don't spawn in Fort Peck. So this is the great staff at the hatchery and Heath Headley's staff. They kind of have to help these salmon along to do that. And it's really interesting how they've done it. But you're one of the few people that I wouldn't say it's super regular. It's like you say, it's like a unicorn, but that you will be able to catch a king salmon through the ice. That has got to be a wild experience, trying to bring a big king salmon up through this little hole in the ice. What is that like especially for some of your clients who not only may have never ice fished, but maybe don't really fish at all very much?
I think once I see what it is and then they see how my reaction is, then they start to panic a little bit because they see me, and it's always the part of once you see what it is and trying to get it out of the hole. But they get pretty excited when you pull it out and you tell them just kind of how rare it is to see one of those on an ice fishing rod. So they're pretty special when you do get one.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever run across where the hole isn't big enough to pull a fish through it?
No, a 10-inch hole pulls a pretty darn big fish through. So I haven't seen that yet.
10-inch in diameter. Yeah, that would be, you may not want to pull that thing through.
Yeah.
Why do you suppose that is that the king salmon is so elusive? Because not only through the ice, but just in general, it's not a fish that you're gonna get into a run of a whole ton of them and catch 20 in a day. I mean, it is not an easy fish to hunt down. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, I think it's like you said, it's the size of the lake and the fish disperse anywhere throughout the whole water system. As we've seen, you get them clear down south of Rock Creek sometimes, and there's west as far as you can possibly go. So you take a body of water that big and you spread that many fish out in it. And they're not a big schooling fish like some other types. So, they're pretty singular. Sometimes you might find a group of 2 or 3. And then once the waters cool off in the wintertime, they could be in 15 feet of water. They could be out in 150 feet of water. So they just pretty much are scattered out through the whole system, I think, is probably the thing.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, folks, if you do ice fish on Fort Peck, don't expect to be pulling a lot of king salmon through the ice, but it is an exciting deal. So of all the fish that you and clients that you take out on the ice, is there one that's the most popular that most people say, hey, can we try to catch this species or that? Or is it, hey, let's just catch whatever we can?
Probably the one fish I get asked for the most on the ice is for lake trout, because a lot of the places where people come and fish, they don't have access to them. They have pike and walleye and whatever that they catch throughout the year where they live, but they don't have the lake trout. So that's kind of the biggest draw, I would say, us, particularly ice fishing for sure.
Mm-hmm. Over your left shoulder, that's a lake trout there, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yep. Yeah. And that's king salmon out of Fort Peck.
King salmon over there.
Yeah.
So that gives you an idea for those Lakers in Fort Peck, catching them through the ice. Do you know about what the average size you usually catch in the wintertime?
I guess I would say a good average would be anywhere from 8 up to 15 pounds. And then occasionally you're going to have, the upper teens. And last year, the biggest one we caught was a young kid. He caught one that was just about 21 pounds. So you never know, but the average size of the fish is really respectable out here on Fort Peck for sure.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about those species, how to target them, how to catch them. But before we get into that, Don, let's talk a little bit about what you take out on the ice, what you recommend someone should have out on the ice. We're going to cover a lot of gear, equipment, rods, all that stuff, just so folks have a pretty good idea of what you should do. Fort Peck can be a bit unique out there, and I'm sure you'll cover some of this, but as we mentioned, it can be windy. It certainly can be colder than most spots in with the exception of like West Yellowstone or something. It can get pretty cold in Montana. So there are some things you need to be careful of. And of course, safety first. That's something you really got to make sure you know what you're doing when you get out, and Donald, covers some of that. So let's start with safety. What is some of the safety gear that you recommend that people have when they get out there? Let's start from the spud bar on through.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. First and foremost, I don't care if you're wearing a pair of jeans and muck boots and you're headed out to check the ice, you got to have a spud bar. And I use that thing all year long. It doesn't matter how thick the ice gets. Anytime I'm coming up on something that looks weird to me, it just takes a second to get out and walk up there and hit it with a spud bar. And there's a couple times that's saved me from having a real problem. It just takes a few seconds. Get out and check it. Even if it's a trail you've been riding or you see other people are running on, it never hurts to get out and double check what you've been driving on. So spud bar, definitely. And then a set of these, the picks. And these
that go around your neck. Yeah.
Around your neck. And these have the little retractable deal. So you're not sticking yourself in your pockets when you have them.
Oh, that's cool. Pull those up again.
We got a little retractable, and the spike is underneath there. So when you stick that thing down in the ice, it pushes that up and exposes the pick in the ice.
So that's on that cord around them. But when you're out on the ice, you're going to unravel that. It goes around your neck. So you always have
on your neck. Yep. And they have other ones that plug together that kind of go real tight here, but I like your cord. You can stick them in your pockets. So if it's kind of an emergency, you're not fumbling around up here to get them. They're just right there in your pockets.
Who makes that?
This is HT Enterprises that makes this kind right here.
Okay.
And, we have lots of them for clients to carry around if they want them. We have a bunch of them in the side-by-sides and in the ice houses. So they're just about anywhere people turn around, there's a set of ice picks.
Yeah, and that's just a must-have. You really want to have those. And I'm going to put a link to, so don't worry about trying to look it up as you're listening or watching, folks. I'll have a link to all the things that Don mentions here, so you don't have to drag around. So we want to make sure we have ice picks and all that for say the different types of things that you use for shelters. I think that's kind of I wouldn't say it's a must have, but if you want to fish on a regular basis and long periods of time, having a good ice shelter is nice to have. Is there one in particular you like or you want to use?
Well, I have 3 of what they call the black hole ice houses that have a hard floor and then the heavy insulated fabric sides on them with the metal frame in them. And in the center, they have a door that pulls up. If somebody wants to try some spearing, you can turn it into a spear shack. And they just hook up onto my side-by-sides and we can pull them around. You can actually move them around by hand if you want. They're not all that heavy. But there's a lot of good pop-ups that take, less than 10 minutes to set up out there now. I just bought a new Eskimo. I think it's a 650 last winter, just because I wanted a little more space to set up if I needed to. And we put that thing in the ice, and with the anchors they have for them, we left it up for several weeks. There's some heavy wind, and as long as you kind of slush it in so the bottom freezes in and you have it staked down good, we had no problems. We didn't take it down until we were done fishing. So that's definitely an option. And you just break it down. It goes in a bag, and you can throw it in your sled or your side-by-side and carry on to the next spot.
Mhm. And I've got some of those up on the screen, folks, that you'll see, so you can get an idea of it. Now, the black hole, is that the brand name too?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. All right. So there'll be a link to that. You can see on the screen what they look like. But I'll tell you what, that will make your life very, very comfortable as
Yeah.
opposed to just, that wind can really get you
Yeah.
and tough. And I like that, having the floor in it because it does kind of help take the heat off of, or I mean, the cold off of your feet there.
Yeah, definitely having that. And it's about probably a 3 or 4 inch thick insulated floor. So it stays pretty warm in there. We put a buddy heater hooked up to a 15-pound propane bottle in there, and it'll be 65 degrees in there and 10,
Oh,
15
nice.
at the most. So
I don't know if anybody would want to fish alone anyway. They might as well just go with you. And that's something to keep in mind as we go through this gear, especially for some of you that don't ice fish, have never, or don't do it a lot. And you say, gee, I don't know if I'd ever want to buy that. I don't do it much. That is a great alternative, is to hire Don or, somebody like Don. We recommend Don just because he's had such great success and does a great job. But um, that way you don't have to have all the gear. You just kind of show up, and we'll get into that as far as what you do need to have. If you want to go that route. It's also a great way to learn, so that down the road when you want to go out on your own, you'll know a lot about where to go, how to go, what to have. Let's talk about augers now. There has been a lot of change in augers over the years. I mean, that used to be my grandpa's day. That was a hand cranking deal. You didn't drill too many holes in a day.
Oh.
What kind of ice auger do you use?
So I have a Ion Alpha that I use now. It's a 10-inch auger. And I also have an Eskimo that's also a 10-inch auger. Both are electric. And I kind of resisted going to electric for a while just because Fort Peck gets a lot of sand and that type of stuff blowing on it that melts down into the ice. And sometimes you can dull up your blades pretty quick with the propane auger that I had. But I was amazed with that electric. Just even when the blades get a little bit dull, you can still cut a ton of holes on a battery with those things. So they're amazing for an electric power head, how much ice and how thick of ice they'll go through and how fast it goes through.
Yeah, a few weeks ago we had Matt McComb up in Northwest Montana, and the Ion was one that he just absolutely loves. He was saying a lot of the same thing. He did say that he doesn't have to go as thick through the ice in Northwest Montana. He said if he ever came out to to Fort Peck, he'd probably have to put a little extension on for that, which kind of goes to about how thick does the ice get out there, in a good cold winter.
Yeah, I'd say a good average you could say is probably 20 to 24 inches if we have, a normal winter. It takes a while for it to build that thick up around the dam area, but down the dry arm, you'll get a couple feet of ice down there usually almost every year, if not more. So I'd say 20 to 24 is average. If we have a real winter like we had a few years ago, I think we had about 32 inches up there around on the main, around the dam area, but it's, we haven't had that since. So, but 20 to 24, good solid ice usually.
Okay. Yeah, that's real solid. We're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're going to get into one of the areas where a lot of personal preference can come in. We're going to talk about rods and reels. And of course, when you're ice fishing, way different as far as size and all that than you would when you're just going out on a typical spring or summer day. So we're going to talk about that right after this. Are you going to get out to your favorite ice fishing hole this year? Yeah, I know. Finding the time is always the hard part, isn't it? Well, the Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer can help you get the things done that you have to do, so you have time to do the things that you want to do. Well, like clearing the driveway or work areas of snow. Yeah, that'll take the happy right out of the holidays for sure. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer has just what you need. Boss snowplows. Those will remove the snow fast like Boss. Or how about something that can help you at work and on your next adventure outdoors? Well, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer has awesome Diamond Sea utility trailers and accessories that can haul work equipment during the week and then your ATV, snowmobile, or other outdoor toys on the weekend. And remember, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer has an amazing service department. Need your trailer rewired so the lights work the way they're supposed to? Don't worry, they got you. They'll have your truck and trailer doing what they're supposed to in no time. How about a little present for yourself, like accessories for your truck? And get this, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer can even help with financing. Now that can make anyone's Christmas merry. Yeah, they've got you covered, gang. It's going to be quite the winter wonderland out there, my friends. So why not make it the best one you've ever had by going to see Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer? They're in Missoula, Montana at 5680 Expressway. Or just go see them online at rmtte.com. That's Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer, rmtte.com. And from everyone in their Missoula location or online at rmtte.com, Merry Christmas from Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, I'm with Don Wilkins. He is a fishing guide on Fort Peck Reservoir. We're going to give a little preview about ice fishing on Fort Peck, especially right now. We're talking about all the equipment and things you need to have, which is, I think, a great thing to know. So, before you go out there, you can kind of do a little shopping around and look. Now, as far as shopping goes, yes, there's a jillion different places you can go online and that. A little tip that I like to give is we really recommend, when you can, to shop local for it. One, it, just helps the local people there, but more importantly, they tend to stock what works and what's best to have near the water body that you're fishing on. So, and advice wise, they're really great. Most of the people that work, like D&G up in Glasgow or Lake Ridge, most everybody that works there fishes there. They give you great advice about where things are at. So I do recommend, when you can, do that. But there are some things, shop online if you need it. It's just when you go to those big box stores, a lot of times they have agreements with manufacturers. They have to carry certain things that, that, not saying they're bad, they just don't really relate to what we do in Montana. So anyway, just a quick thing on that. So let's talk rods and reels. What is your preference to use out there, Don?
So I'm going to just show you, this is one of my favorite setups here. You can see it.
Okay.
That's a Fluker 40. Spinning reel.
Wait, say that name again. I'm sorry, I got over there.
It's a Fluger President, and it's a size 40. I have some 30-pound braid on here with a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader, and this is a setup that we like to use for Lakers, and that is a Walleye Hunter 3/4 ounce jig head and a 4.8 inch Kitech paddle tail with an 1 7/8 Northland stinger hook on the back. And this rod is made by Line Dancer Rods. He's actually a Montana kid that just started making them. And we used this thing last year, and a lot of the clients loved this thing. So that's one of the rigs that I really like. And this Walleye Hunter jig head for the past few years has been money on those lake trout.
Yeah.
Nice. One other I have here too, and this is an Okuma Seamar reel. It's a bait feeder on the back, which you can use on some tip-up setups. But this is a 44-inch HDS rod, which is all my favorites. And this is a S&T tackle jig head, 1 ounce. And these guys are out of Glendive. And same stinger head or stinger hook, same Kitech 4.8-inch paddle tail. And those, both of those jig heads are available. I think Lake Ridge and D&G has the Walleye Hunter jig heads, and then the S&T ones are at the Lake Ridge, and I think maybe Scott down at the marina has them also, but I'm not.
Yeah, Scott's got a great selection of stuff there as well. We're talking about the Fort Peck Marina too. So great stuff, great places to check out before you shop online. But if you need to, do it. Now, as far as the how stiff you want that rod, obviously for the larger lake trout, you're not going to want a real thin rod. I mean, what's the? I mean, I know some people really want to feel that fish and have the play and all that, but if you get too much, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to bring them in. Would you say what's a minimum rod that how much you want to get into there?
Sure.
On Fort Peck?
Both of these guys have done a really good job with these blanks, and they're a heavy with a fast tip. So when trout gets up towards the top, that tip, they love the things are notorious for head shakes. So the soft tip takes that heavy head shake out, but they still got that good stiff back half of that rod. So you can, handle them fish, bringing them up, and boy, they do an excellent job on both ends of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you fish west of the mountains, some of you, might be used to going after perch or, the little kokanee and that. So you're used to having those, way more flexible rods than that. Probably not going to be a good rod to use on Fort Peck.
No, especially when you get down into some of that deeper water. That's where that, the heavy section of that blank, really helps send the hook and bringing those fish up. And then that nice soft last 4 inches or 5 inches of it, you lose a lot less fish than if you had a real super stiff rod up once you get towards the top there.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the areas I think that people make some mistakes, or at least I have heard that a lot of mistakes are made. When I first started ice fishing, that was a big educational thing for me, was just using the line on the reel that you would use in, throughout spring, summer, and fall. When you're ice fishing, there's actually line that's kind of made for ice fishing, right?
Yeah, they do have some of that. And some of the braid that I use is the Power Pro has the stuff that's called the Super Slick, and it helps keep the water from kind of adhering to it. And it doesn't freeze up quite as much. And that's the one kind of downside to braided line, I guess, when you're out ice fishing, is it does like to freeze to your guides sometimes.
Okay.
It's kind of the trade-off. If you're, down 100 feet fishing for lake trout and you have a short rod and a bunch of monofilament on there, there's so much stretch and everything. It's tough to get a good hook set on it. So, but yeah, there's that braid. And then, who's the other guy that makes that spider wire? They have a good winter braid that's also really good for that. So either one of those. But I always recommend a braided line on anything when you're ice fishing, and that's just due to the wear on the edge of the ice when you're fighting a fish. So holds up better than monofilament does.
Yeah, folks that just are really sold on monofilament, they got to change their line off the reel quite often, because it will. I don't care who makes it; it's going to fray.
Yeah,
and that stuff. Is there something you use to kind of keep that braided from freezing onto your tips or that? Is there anything you use, or you just got to kind of keep an eye on it and make sure?
You just keep an eye on it. I've not put anything on there. I think there's some things that they make that you can put on your line, but I don't know. I've always been kind of don't like to put stuff on there if I don't need to. But
okay. Now let's talk about an area that, gosh, I get emails on both sides of this. Not going to debate it a lot here, folks, because I'm sorry, I'm talking about electronics. The genie is out of the bottle. I don't think you're ever going to put it back in. And especially with ice fishing, to me, electronics is real important. Otherwise, you're going to be drilling holes like crazy. You could spend all day just hunting. This kind of gives you your eyes under the water and below the ice, right? What are the electronics that you use when you're out ice fishing on Fort Peck?
So I have a couple of Hummingbirds, Helix 9s that we will use occasionally. But by and large, we use the Garmin Live Scopes with an LVS 62 transducer, which you kind of need for when you get into some of those deep water environments that the lake trout hang out in. But the biggest thing that it speeds up for me with the 62 is you can put it in forward mode. I can punch a hole and spin that transducer around, and I can set it up to where I want to look 150 or 200 feet away from where that transducer is sitting. And if I don't see anything, well, now I can go, between 150 and 200 feet before I punch another hole. Where with just the Vexilar that we used to have, or the hummingbirds, you're probably punching a hole every 50 feet and you may still be missing something. But locating the fish, the Garmin has sped that up immensely.
Mm-hmm. So do you use a Vexilar at all anymore?
I think they've sat on the shelf in my garage for 2 or 3 years now. So I can honestly say no, but we do take the hummingbirds out with us. Sometimes for hole hopping and things like that. They're pretty fast, rather than packing the live scope around. Live scopes primarily stay in the ice houses, but if it's a nice day out, we'll load them up and we go hole hop around with those things too.
So, as far as, I think sometimes people, especially again, I really kind of use these preview shows to help folks that don't ice fish a lot or maybe never have. We tend to envision, okay, this is stuff all mounted on the boat. How the heck are you taking it out on the ice? Most of what you're talking about you do use on the water, just in your boat in the spring and summer, and then there's a way to obviously take that out. Now, do you have a separate for ice and separate for what I like to call regular fishing, or do you dismount and put it in a new holder and stuff?
So I have shuttles that the Helix, the hummingbirds go in. They're ice shuttles built just for those, and shuttles for the Garmin's also. One is made by TKI in Billings that I use, and then the other ones are just the Garmin shuttles that you can purchase through the Garmin outlets themselves. And either one is great. The TKI shuttle's a little more compact and a little easier to pack around. And then the transducer poles that I use in the wintertime are the Brew City poles, and they're great out there. They're rock solid. When you get them on the ice, they do not move. So.
Mm-hmm.
And in the summertime, when you're ready to go back out, one of the shuttles I take out and I actually use it in my boat all year, but the screens clip right back into the cradles that are in the boat and go right back to work.
Yeah. And that's something, again, if you've got all that gear, then start looking at these shuttles in different ways, so you're not doubling up, because they don't give these away. They're expensive. So good idea to use what you have. As far as learning curve, where I guess old timers like me, we're all used to just drilling that hole and we're down there. I don't know if I'm all the way to grumpy old men type stuff. I'm not far away. How hard is it to learn this stuff, Don?
If you can read the screen on the electronics, it doesn't take any time. There's people, especially with the live scope, they pick that up in 5 or 10 minutes because you can just see exactly what's going on. You show them, this is your jig. Over here is a fish coming from 30, 40 feet away. And it makes the learning curve very, very short. So just the visibility down there, it's pretty unbelievable how fast people pick up on it.
Well, when we had Matt McComb on, one of the things that he's really big on is the underwater camera. He just absolutely loves that. And the underwater camera he has, unbelievably inexpensive, like $120, but it can look forward and it can look straight down. So he really likes that. Do you use underwater cameras? And why do you prefer to go the other way?
So I have one. I haven't used it really since we came over here, just because of the depth of the water we're usually fishing in. I did use it more when we lived over in Northwest Montana, fishing for some little kokanee salmon that are light biters and perch and things like that. But here, the depth of the water kind of diminishes the return on all the process of putting the camera down there. And most of the shallow water fishing that we're doing is with tip ups. We'll do some jigging, but with the live scope, you can still see everything that's going on. If a fish comes in there, you're you're going to see it one way or the other. That thing doesn't lie. I'll tell you that much.
Right. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea. I was pretty sure that was going to be the answer. I mean, there's only so much those things are going to work for you when you start getting real deep. You mentioned tip ups. That is when you go out on Fort Peck, you're going to see that is a very popular way of fishing. I kind of refer to it as like kind of setting up a trap line
Yeah.
out there on the water. What kind of tip ups do you recommend, and how many can you have per person?
So we get 6 lines per person out on Fort Peck, and you can fish your tip ups like set lines. You just have to make sure you check them every 24 hours. And if you're going to go out and fish with a rod or a spear, like some people are spearing, that also counts as a means. So you have to make sure you only have 5 tip ups in if you're going to go spearing or if you're going to go fish with a rod. 6 lines per person. And one of the tip ups that I really like is this HT Enterprises. It's a Predator, got a big spool on it, and just has the one. I'll show you here. Just has the one single pin on the bottom to reel it up. So if you have big bulky gloves on and you're ice fishing, it's kind of nice. It's a little easier to rig up. And then it's just a little number 10 treble hook and just 2 little tiny split shot, and that's rigged up because we can use live minnows here. So that's what we use pretty much all the time on our tip ups is going to be live bait of some sort. Sometimes we'll use some dead bait for, some northerns and stuff. And then this is another one I like to use too. And this is a Frable, and it's their Arctic Fire tip up.
Okay.
Got the 2 pins to reel in, but it's not too big a deal. And this has some of that tieable titanium wire for a leader on it. And sometimes I'll put a small little bead on there for an attractor for fly and things like that.
So that titanium, is that something you like to use just if pike decide to get after you, they're not going to tear up the line? Or
yeah, for sure. And it doesn't bother the walleye. It's very, very, very thin diameter. Doesn't bother the walleye at all. So when the northern starts to show up and we start to get our fluorocarbon leaders bit off, that's what we switch to. One thing I'll say about the difference in these 2 tip ups is the Frable has kind of a cloth flag and the HT has a plastic. And like you mentioned before, we get a lot of wind out here. Those cloth flags are a little more prone to the wind whipping when popping it up. So what I do is I have some little rubber bands and I'll just roll the flag up, put that rubber band on there and put it down. And then you don't have to worry about the wind popping that flag up. The plastic ones, it doesn't bother as much because the flag doesn't really whip around at all. So that's just something to keep.
Okay.
And it's just, I only do that if I know we have a front coming in and it's going to blow overnight or something. So I'll just wrap that flag up and the wind doesn't come up then. And then, one other thing on the tip ups I like to use, since we can fish them overnight, are these hold covers made by Therm.
That was going to be my next question is how do you deal with them freezing up, the hole freezing up? Show that hole cover one more time, would you?
Yep. And see, it's got a split right there where the stem, I can just show you how that slides on there. It just you just slide the tip up in.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
And then it's just going to sit like that with spool in the water. And if you have a little bit of snow, get this set. And when you're all said and done, take your shovel, which, by the way, is another piece of safety equipment that everybody should have. If you're traveling with a machine, take a little bit of snow, cover that thing up, and it could be 10 below out. If you get that insulated up, there'll just be a tiniest little skin of ice underneath there with that cover and that snow insulating it. Lasts for a long time.
Wow, great idea. So you're using what you got out there in the wild, the snow, as your insulation, as well as that hole cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't use one of those, I gotta think you're gonna have a lot of trouble out there.
Yeah. We pick up a few tip ups every year, I think, where they get froze clear down to the spool and people can't get them out. So we'll take a spud bar over there and cut a big hole and take them home and thaw them out. But yeah, if it gets cold, I think that, the bottom of that spool is probably only about 8 inches down there. Man, a good hard cold night, a 10-inch hole, that thing could freeze right to that spool overnight pretty easy.
Mm.
So
Yeah, folks, that is going to go in the must-have category, I would say, if you're using tip-ups for
yeah,
sure.
if you're going to fish them and leave them overnight, you've got to have something to cover that hole without a doubt.
Well, we're going to get into some species. I mean, we might as well go fishing here, but I wanted to spend a lot of time on equipment because it's so important. And if I've left anything out when we come back, you can mention that too. But um, one thing I did want to ask before we take this last break is, what makes you decide where you're going to drill that first hole? I mean, you got a lot of lake out there.
Well,
What says this is the spot?
I think a lot of it has been just trial and error so far over the years. But if I'm going to go out and look for lake trout through the ice, I'm going to look for ledges and drop offs that are kind of close to some deeper water as a good place to start. And kind of the same thing with my tip ups. I'm looking for points and little break lines. Sometimes on the main lake points, I'll throw a few tip ups out there. And like you said, a trap line, we'll throw a few there. We'll run down the lake a quarter mile to another, maybe a bay will be the next spot. We'll go points and bays until you kind of figure out where the majority of the fish are hanging out. And whenever I usually set 2, maybe 3 at differing depths so that each little spot you come to, you make a little mental note. And sometimes you go down along through your trap line, like you say, and you start to notice similarities in one spot to the next, and you can put the puzzle together pretty quick that way.
Yeah. So you're using those as kind of like your little research pieces as well, then.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, let's take one last break. And when we come back, we're going to get into talking about how the heck do we find these species and how do we catch them and all that stuff. So we'll do that right after this. This holiday season, celebrate the spirit of home with Superior Hardwoods. They're your trusted woods specialists located in Missoula, Montana. Since 1977, they've been introducing customers across Montana and all over the country, for that matter, to the joy of having true quality wood products in their home by guiding them through each step with genuine expertise. Now, some folks have asked me, Downrigger, I'm not a professional designer or contractor. I can't just walk into Superior Hardwoods. They're in Missoula on my own, right? You sure can. Anyone can get the exact same help and advice that some of the top designers and contractors in the country have been getting from Superior Hardwoods since, like I said, 1977. In fact, helping homeowners is their specialty.
I purchased a 4,400 square foot home in West Covina, California, 18 months ago. It is a ranch-style home, and I wanted something different and beautiful to install on the floor. I looked on the internet and found Superior Hardwoods of Montana. They guaranteed the milling would be perfect, which it was. The price was excellent, and the next house I live in will also have the same floor.
Superior Hardwoods is, in a way, always in the holiday spirit of helping dreams come true, from working with you on ideas from building your home from ground up or just adding that special hand-picked live-edge slab, exotic lumber piece, reclaimed wood, or the perfect wall paneling to make your house say welcome home every time you walk through the door. So stop by anytime and tour their beautiful showroom in Missoula and let them guide you through the woods this December. Oh, and remember, you can also visit Superior Hardwoods anytime, like right now, by going to superior-hardwoods.com. That's superior-hardwoods.com. And from their family to yours, Merry Christmas from Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Go see him. We're back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, and we're talking with Don Wilkins, getting a little preview of the things we need if we're going to fish the big water, as a lot of us refer to it, out on Fort Peck Reservoir. Don, a couple things I forgot to ask you about. One is the all-important suit that you wear, one, to stay warm, but two, nowadays, the things you wear kind of have a dual purpose. They keep you warm, but they also, if you go through the ice, you're going to float. What do you prefer to wear to handle both of those things?
Okay, so last 3 years, I've got the Striker Ice, the Predator is the model that they make. It has a zip-in liner for the coat and a zip-in liner for the bibs. So depending on conditions out there, you can add or subtract to it. And I can tell you from somebody that is out there, it doesn't matter how cold it really is. If people are in the ice houses, I'm still running around checking tip ups and doing all the other stuff. That thing keeps me warm out there when I know nothing else will. It'd be 20, 30 below out there. And sometimes the coat that's on there is too warm if you're out busting out tip ups. So it is
Really?
yeah, it's very, very warm. Very, very warm. I would recommend that. And it's one of the floating ones also. So if you're looking to stay warm out there, that's the best one that I've ran into by far.
Have you ever fell through the ice out there?
Years ago, not on Fort Peck, but years ago out on Middle Thompson Lake between Libby and Kalispell, I went through it.
Yeah.
And you used to be able to have open fires out on the ice, and there was an old fire there, and it had snowed over the top of it. And stuff had melted through, and me and a buddy were just motoring across there going pipe fishing, and it was like a big tabletop turned up and just flipped me under.
Oh, no.
Scared the heck out of me, and I was glad I had somebody with me to help, that's for sure.
Open fires out on the ice.
Yeah, we used to do it all the time. Just build a big old bonfire and out there on the ice, you know.
Live and learn, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Jeez. Okay. And then the other thing I forgot to mention was the all important throw rope.
Yeah, sure.
If somebody goes through the ice, you don't want to run to the edge of the ice to pull them out.
Nope.
Obviously, that's not stable. So what do you like to use?
So this one is made by Clam, and the way it works, it's got a weight on the bottom, and you hang on to this loop here on the top. Hangs open, and you just throw that thing, and you can throw that 50-foot of rope pretty easy. Then whoever needs it just grabs the end. But this is a 50. We have a couple of hundreds. Every one of the.
So are you throwing the whole bag and everything?
You just take it just like this, and you just fling that weight while you hang on to this looped end. So when they grab a hold, then you have that rope. But this is a 50-footer. We have 100-footers. And man, I don't, if we're walking, if we're on the snow machines, if we're on the side-by-sides, you have one of them with you everywhere you go. Because like you said, if something happens and somebody does go through, you're not going to run right up to the edge of the ice there and get them out. So.
Yeah, you're probably going to go right through with them.
Yeah.
And you're there to help them not swim with them.
Yeah.
So
one other thing I would mention too, if you are out there in a machine, is to have a good tow strap with you, because we ran into a couple situations last year with people who, were up in some shallow water and got in a couple of cracks along the shoreline and broke through, and we had to tip their side-by-sides up and pull them out. So having that stuff right with you, because, sometimes you might be 7, 8, 9 miles from the ramp that you come off of, and having that with you to get them guys out of the water right then can save a lot of time and keep people from being real uncomfortable, because odds are they're probably wet while they're standing there waiting for you. So.
Right. Okay. Good thoughts there. Before you take a machine out on the ice, whether it's your side-by-side or snowmobile or whatever, what are you looking for there that tells you it's okay to put a machine on the ice?
Well, I can honestly tell you that every time I take it out, the first trip I make across there, Becky or somebody's usually in the side-by-side, and I have my sled and my ice auger out in front of them, and I just check the ice the whole way. I think last year I walked from, I guess what would be the south point of McGuire, probably 2/3 of the way back to Nelson Creek, checking the ice, because if you're the first one out there, you got to check it. There's no room for error when you have a machine out on the ice. So if you are traveling it and you notice something in front of you that doesn't look right, just get out and check it, and keep your speed, to where if you see something coming, you can get stopped in plenty of time to get out and check it. That's probably the other thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see people bombing across that lake pretty darn fast, and if something was to happen, there's no chance that they'd get slowed down. So.
Yeah. And then lastly, on the safety thing, Fort Peck, and I don't know if it's super unique, but for Fort Peck, it seems we hear a lot more about are the pressure ridges that you got to really be mindful of.
Yeah, for sure.
What is a pressure ridge?
It's just a spot where the ice is built up, and it starts to put so much pressure on itself. It's one sheet will pop down and the other one pops over the top of it. So basically all you have is a ridge across there, and the ice might be pretty thick and seem pretty solid, but it's just a bunch of broken up ice that's stacked up on top of each other. And I refuse to drive over the tops of those things. You have the ability to get on the shoreline at the closest, safest place to drive around a pressure crack and get back on the ice at the next safest spot. You just can't run miles and miles on the shoreline. But, I don't know. Anytime I see, the past few years, there's always somebody that's going over one of them and gets jammed up in them. So if you're going to do it, that's your choice. But man, you got to be very, very cautious.
Not a good idea. Yeah. Okay. So I think we've got safety down pretty good. Again, if you have any questions, just shoot me an email, and there's links to do that there to learn all about these different precautions. Really, though, nowadays with all this great equipment you talked about, ice fishing is really safe. As long as you're thinking and following the right stuff, right?
Yeah. It's you just got to take care of yourself. Don't trust somebody else's trail that you see out there. You don't know how much they checked it. But as long as you're checking the ice wherever you go, you shouldn't have an issue. Check it in, check it back out. You'll be fine.
So let's talk about fish out there to catch. What would you say are your, top 3 or 5 that you target most often with your clients?
Lake trout are far and away the number one through the ice, without a doubt. I will get some calls for some northerns and some walleye. But those are the 3. In the walleye fishing, we will get out and jig for them a little bit. People that specifically request northerns, that's pretty much going to be tip-up fishing with some big baits usually, and a lot of live bait, some dead bait and stuff like that. So that's pretty much the 3, and you're going to run into some catfish and some smallmouth and some ling, is just kind of some bycatch, just the way we fish for them. So that's pretty much the top 3 is those ones.
So let's talk lake trout. What do you use? And let's kind of go through. Okay, we've got our hole done. Now, what are you putting down there? What tells you how deep to go, and what's going to make these lake trout go after what you have?
Sure. So again, it's my go-to is always that Walleye Hunter 3/4 ounce jig head and a 4.8 Kitech sight flash paddle tail. Mm-hmm. In the wintertime, I'm always looking for what's the popular way they put it, a room with a view. So it's some kind of a bench or a flat or a spine where those fish can cruise along, and they like to look out over some of that deeper water where those ciscos are going to be, and they'll just run out and kind of ambush them out of there. And I like to start probably in like 55 feet of water, and I'll work my way out, and we've caught them in the wintertime clear out in 105 feet of water. So
really?
Yeah, I think mainly it seems like wintertime, 55 to say 65 or 75 feet seems to be the number that I usually end up fishing the majority of the time we're out there. And as far as getting these fish to bite, Fort Peck is really clear, and those lake trout have really good eyesight. So sometimes fishing 8 to 10 feet off the bottom is where we got to be to get fish, but we've also had to be up where we're 20 feet off the bottom to, get their curiosity up to the point where they'll actually come up and want to engage with that lure. And then it's just a matter of when you see them coming, just the right speed and just reel that thing away from them until they catch it on their own, because they will. If they want it, you can't reel that handle fast enough to get it away from them.
Okay. And I have a video of you showing you using your electronics to kind of see what these lake trout are going to do with that.
Just big pulls. Get that thing fired down there. There you go. Okay, hang on one sec. Okay, stop there. Reel up just a smidge. Yep, go. Go. Oh, look at all of them. Big pulls. Get that thing fired down there. There you go.
color.
Okay, hang on one sec. Okay, stop there. Reel up just a smidge. Yep, go. Go. Oh, look at all of them.
But obviously you're vertical jigging. Is there any kind of a touch or a technique you're using there?
I would just say that too much jigging is too much with them lake trout. It's very subtle, believe it or not. Sometimes we just will kind of dead stick it for 3 or 4 minutes and see if anything. Let the fish kind of come up and make their own move on it. If I do anything, I'll have it up 8-10 feet. If nothing shows up, I'll drop it down to the bottom, maybe bounce it in the bottom a couple times, and then I reel it up really quick right back to that 8 to 10 foot mark and leave it there. And then sometimes I'll reel it up 20 to 30 feet off the bottom, and just that motion of that lure screaming up out of there, all of a sudden you'll see a fish kind of come over to investigate what it was all about, and you'll drop it down. And as soon as they see that jig coming down, boy, they can't take it. So that's about it. As far as just constantly jigging and jigging and jigging, I don't really do very much of that. So it just seems like,
Okay.
a little more, a little less is more when it comes to those things, I think.
And as far as color of the you were showing those paddle tails that white, do you switch up color? Does that make any difference ice fishing for these big lakers?
It doesn't seem like it a lot. That Kitech looks so much like a Cisco fleeing away from them in the water when you start reeling away from them. It's tough for them. Once they engage on that thing, seems like it's tough for them to not bite it. But there is a chartreuse color of that Kitech that I will swap out sometimes also. And there's also a couple of spoons. One is called it's made by that Custom Baits company. And it's called a wing ding. And that thing works pretty darn good.
I've heard people talk about
it.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite spoons to use ice fishing. I don't use a lot of them. Mostly going to be these paddle tails, and then that spoon. I will also say sometimes if we get into a decent area where we've been fishing lake trout for 3 or 4 or 5 days, I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people have seen what a jaw jacker is. So
I was going to ask you if you ever use that.
Yeah, I'll set them up kind of around in that area where we're ice fishing. I'll put a big shiner minnow down there with a couple split shots and a number 10 stinger hook in its back. And sometimes it'll pick up some fish, sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes it's just a good tattletale to let you know that there's some fish in the area too. It just pops that thing off. So
describe what a jaw jacker is a little bit.
It's just a base, 2 arms in the front to give it some support. And you pull the rod tip over into a trigger while your line is down the hole. When a fish comes and grabs it, it trips that trigger and snaps the rod up. And the idea is that it sets the hook for you. So I would recommend if you're going to use them for lakers, make sure you have your drag backed off pretty good, because you don't want it to be too tight and you don't see it, and the fish will wreck your line and stuff pretty quick if you got the drag cinched down too tight and you're not there to take care of the fish.
Right.
But they work really well.
Okay.
Not, lakers as far down as 90 feet with those jaw jackers. So they work pretty darn well for those things at times.
Yeah. While you were talking, we had a jaw jacker up on the screen there. So folks, you get an idea of what that does and what it looks like, but good to have it in your arsenal. Anything else on the lakers that we haven't mentioned that's good to know?
They have another thing that's kind of a tip up. It's called a finicky fooler, and that works with your fishing rod also. Instead of it being loaded up, it's got a little trigger that pops a flag up, and then your line can just free spool out, and that fish is free to swim around with that bait.
A finicky fooler.
Yeah, they work pretty good. You kind of want to make sure you're there if you're looking to release fish, because if you let them swim around with that thing for too long, you can always cut the line if the hook's down there too far. But they have a tendency to kind of swallow the lure or swallow your bait, if you go for too long. So, but they work really well also.
Okay. All right. So this gives you folks out there a dang good idea of what to do. As far as walleye, you're mainly going with your tip ups. I mean, do you ever, when you're fishing sit out and try to jig for walleye at all, or is it just put it on the tip up and see what you get?
It's mainly tip ups out here, and
Mhm.
I don't really know why, but we'll get out and jig for them with some some 1/4 ounce BMC jigs or some small spoons with just a minnow head on the spoon, or we'll use like a whole fathead minnow on the jig. And if you're gonna fish for those, it's gonna mainly be the first couple hours of daylight or the last couple hours of daylight. And most of the time that we've had success with them, it's not been a lot of jigging. It's pretty subtle, light spoons that kind of have a lot of flutter to them, and we'll pick a few up like that. But for the most part, by and large, it's a tip up bite. And if the walleye are on and you're in a good spot with the tip ups, it can be some really fast fishing. So it can be pretty
Yeah.
good sometimes.
So you get into it and go. And my experience with the walleye is it seems like, they tend to change their behavior pretty good when it gets cold and they're under the ice. They like to conserve that energy. So they're you're not going to get them to do a lot of crazy stuff to bring them in. They're either there or they're not. Am I correct on that?
That seems to be the way I notice it too. Even with the tip ups, there'll be, a few northerns you'll pick up here and there, and maybe not a lot else going on. And then all of a sudden you'll come out one morning and you'll have, maybe a limit or a limit and a half of walleye on, and then nothing for, the next couple of days is kind of sporadic. And then all of a sudden here comes the walleye, with starting to feed again. So one thing I have noticed when it comes to those, especially ice fishing, Fort Peck doesn't get a ton of snow cover sometimes, and we do have some fairly clear ice. When you get into some of those full moon phases overnight, it seems like we have more walleye on our tip ups than we do any other time throughout those moon phases. So that bright moon through that clear ice must really get those things feeding at night like that.
Mm-hmm. And you can catch some beautiful walleye, but it's not like summertime where we're having all the fun, targeting them, using your forward-facing sonar and jigging, and all. It's just let the tip up do the job.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's luck of the draw with those things. There's certain areas that we have found certain times of the year through the ice season where they kind of start to seem to congregate, especially late ice when they're still ice, but they know it's getting that time of year where they're going to be spawning in the next few weeks, and they'll start to make little moves here and there, and you can kind of get in front of them and catch some nice fish here and there for sure.
As far as if you do want to target the pike, how do you fish for those? Is that more of a tip up kind of bite, or are you going specifically for targeting those through the hole and jigging or whatever?
So we've had some success jigging for some of the northerns with those same kind of paddle tails that we were using for the Lakers, just with a little bit smaller head. But mainly if we're looking for big northerns, we'll get out some pretty heavy steel leaders, maybe some dead herring, some bigger dead fish, some bigger live sucker minnows or things like that. And you have some quick strike rigs, and you pretty much want to be where you can see those tip ups, because even with some of the tip ups, we've got 80-pound braid on them, and you have a big steel leader. A 20-pound northern thrashing around on the end of that is going to tear your to pieces pretty darn quick. So we usually will let those tip ups just free spool, and then it's a foot race to see who gets to the flag first and gets to catch a fish. That's usually the drill. If it's a northern specific kind of deal, that's how we do it. And one thing I should show you, because we were talking about being able to fish these tip ups and fish them overnight. When we are setting for, say, walleye and that, and this is just to show you, I'll pull off, say I have this set, the depth I have set, I give them about 6 feet of line to run with that minnow. And then you just take your line, flip it over like so, and put a little half hitch on there. And then that fish is going to run that 6 feet of line off, and that's going to come tight. And a lot of times that helps set the hook. And besides that, that fish can't go over into the rocks or the brush or into your other tip ups and tangle everything up. So
great idea.
Yeah. If you are going to fish multiple tip ups and leave them overnight, make sure you tie them off. Because I can tell you from experience, when I first came here, I didn't do that. And I had one great big northern on and it had 6 flags up. But guess what? It was all the same fish, and he had to have.
Oh no.
Oh, it was a mess. Giant mess. So yeah.
He said, if you're gonna get me, I'm taking everything with
Oh,
me.
and it was bad. So, but yeah, I learned that lesson really quick. Tie them babies off.
Okay. Well, that's great advice. How about, it seems like one fish that got ignored for a lot of years on Fort Peck, but now is becoming more popular is the smallmouth. Is that anything you can get through the ice much?
We've caught a
On
few on the
Peck?
tip ups, but from what I gather, the smallmouth like to move out in a little bit deeper water and find something that's a little bit warmer where they can still have some feed. They don't particularly like, that really cold water in the wintertime. So they'll move out into some deeper spots. And I've heard of guys off like Shaft House Point in 50 feet of water fishing for Lakers and catching some smallies out there. So I think they wander around quite a bit, where the water temperature is comfortable, and they may even go out and suspend out somewhere over deeper water as long as they have some food to eat. Fish, as long as they're comfortable, they don't really care where they're at.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned Cisco. For those that are not familiar with Fort Peck, that another word for them is lake herring. They are probably the main forage fish for a lot of different species out there. Of course, the salmon love them. In the summertime, when we're fishing for those big king salmon, a lot of times we'll look for those schools of Cisco. In the winter, do the Cisco do the same thing? Do they tend to school up and do that kind of thing? Is that something to look for, or is it just, if they're there, there's probably going to be Big Daddy down below going to munch on them?
Yeah. So when the water gets cold, like it is now, you'll see those schools of Cisco's clear up in like 10 or 15 feet of water now. So they're just scattered out all over the place. But I will say one thing with the lake trout, in the wintertime especially, they're going to be wherever that food is. So if you find them and you find food, and a lot of these places, there's not a whole lot of traffic out there. If you don't just beat them up day after day and you have a few other spots, those fish will stay in those areas, because as long as the food is there, they're not going to go. The water temperature is good, the food is there, and they'll stay there all year. And as far as up in the shallows go, man, there's, like they always say, everything in Fort Peck eats those Cisco, and we'll catch the pike, the walleye, everything, 8-10 feet of water, and they're full of Cisco.
Yeah, that's that is the fish. When I was talking with Heath Headley last week, he was talking about, kind of, especially for the salmon, as far as how good the salmon fishing is going to be and how well that population of the fingerlings they just planted, as so goes the Cisco, so goes a lot of the other population. That's an important fish, though not one you would target and fish for, really, but it is an important fish. So good to know what those things are, and keep an eye, because if they're there, there's fish there. So, yeah. Before we go, Don, is there anything as far as other species or any of that I haven't asked you about that you think is important for people to know?
I don't think so. We touched on pretty much what you can reasonably expect to catch. And if you're tip up fishing, 90% of the fish are going to be either pike or walleye. And then you're going to have, some catfish, smallmouth, and some ling sprinkled in there. And we catch, northerns on our tip up sometimes in 8-10 feet of water. And man, I'll tell you what, hand lining one of those things in is a chore. So that's probably just, anytime you have a flag up, you don't know what fish will be on it up on Fort Peck. And I think that's the funnest thing about the fishing out here, especially when it comes to tip ups. It can literally be anything on there. So,
yeah, I love the saying. I'm trying to think of who said it, but we're out there and they said, well, it's time to go open the Christmas presents, because you don't know what's in there. You don't know what you're going to get. You see all these flags up. Okay, here we go. And that is really cool about it. What's the largest laker you've caught through the ice out there?
I'm not sure. We don't weigh a lot of them because it's cold. And if we're going to release them, we want to get them back. We had a kid last year, though. We had a really warm day. I think it was 45 degrees, and man, he pulled one out that was almost 21 pounds, just a big, beautiful fish. So we got a good weight on that and got that thing back. But that's the biggest one I can remember through the ice, in a while. But there could have been some that were as close. But like I said, when it's real cold, we just try to get them unhooked, get them back in the water before things start to freeze on them. So that's one thing people should keep in mind. If you're going to release a fish and it's cold and you want to get measurements and weigh it and all that, if you have that fish out so long, you see those eyes of it start to get glazed over, you probably may as well just keep it, because that fish is probably not going to make it. So.
Okay. Good to know there. If people want to book a trip, and especially if you've never fished Fort Peck or any of that, I highly recommend you. You're going to save yourself so much time and frustration of where to go, how to do it. Book with Don, and then that way he can really teach you a lot of stuff. Every body of water is different, and when you get to know it, it's going to help you a lot. So even if you're an experienced fisherman, good idea to use a pro like Don to be able to get to know what to use and all that. It's going to give that learning curve big time. How do folks get in touch with you to book a trip? And I know you are very popular and you book up quick. Do you have any openings left this winter at all?
I have a few. The back end of January, we have some days. And then after, I believe, March 8th, up until ice out, we have some days. And it just depends on what people want to fish for. We also have days open earlier than that. We'll start doing our tip ups, and we'll do a little bit of spearing here and there if people want to do it. Just as soon as we can get on the ice down around in that Nelson McGuire area. And we started doing some of that last year. And
Fun.
had some really good days for some nice eater, walleye, and some northerns and some ling and stuff like that. So there's some availability there. But as far as for when we're going to reasonably look at the bigger part of the lake being froze, it's getting pretty full. So you're looking at late January or early March.
And do you prefer folks to call and leave a message, or is there a website that you prefer they go to?
Yeah, so there's a number of different ways you can get a hold of me. You can, like you said before, up at the Lakeridge, you can call. You can get on the Fort Peck Fishing with Trevor's Guide Service, his website. Get the Net Outfitters, Big Sky Charters, and Real Therapy with Vern Gagnon. Any of those places. And we can get it figured out if I got the days, and you guys can talk price and all that good stuff and try to get you out on the ice.
Yeah. And if you're booked, which you likely are going to be, can whoever is helping, whether it be you or somebody else, in one of those services, I'm sure they could probably recommend other guides, or they may have other guides that they work with that can get you out on the water.
Yeah, absolutely. And, depending on people's experience, if they're bringing their own equipment and they're just looking for some help to find some safe paths out there and maybe some places to get started. Even if I have a trip, I'm more than happy to have people follow me out and find a good, safe place on the ice. And one thing I will recommend too, if you're coming here and you're going to travel, is have some type of mapping capability that will save your trail in and out. Because, the snow blows, it gets dark, it gets foggy. And if you don't have a way of seeing where your trail is, then you're kind of traveling blind, going back and forth. So
so like Navionics on your cell phone or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. And in our side-by-sides, we have a mount in there for a little hummingbird in there. It's got the Lake Master chip in it. And then you can see all the contours of everything, and it helps save a lot of time when you're looking for, likely areas to look for lake trout or places to set your tip ups. You can see all the underwater contours right there in your machine while you're sitting there. Or if you're on foot and you have the Navionics app, it's right there on your phone while you're pulling your sled out. So,
okay. And sometimes cell service can get a little sketchy. So, like the hummingbird, some of those things I imagine might be a little bit more reliable. Aren't they working more off like a GPS satellite thing? Or
look, if it's your hummingbird unit, it's just working off your battery in your side-by-side, and you just plug that chip in there, and it doesn't matter where you're at, as long as it's powered up.
Yeah,
of your map, so you're good.
It's just going off the chip and the latest download from that chip you got.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to put in the description, the podcast description. I'll give you a few different things to look at, different choices, folks, of different ones to have. I think that's a great idea, though, of saving that so okay, here's where we were yesterday. Let's follow that again, because at least you have a decent idea that that's pretty good, but you're still going to want to check and spud bar a little in that every day, correct?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, a video from last year, our trail, we were coming out of Rock Creek, looked kind of weird when we went in. There was a little seep of water there. So I got everybody up the lake about 4 or 5 miles where we were fishing, got them all set up, and I told them I want to go back and check our trail. This was our trail from this morning, just a couple hours ago. A lot of snow last night. And as you can see, if you were to try driving through there, there's probably 4 feet of water right there, and I never even made it to the bottom. So be careful out there. That was our trail that we had been traveling on. So always, no matter what, no matter how many, and that road, we'd been driving for 2 weeks or better, but just opened up a little split there. So like you said, no matter what, always keep your eyes out in front of you when you're traveling, and don't drive faster than you can get stopped, for sure.
Don, I really appreciate all your time that you've taken with us and really given us a great class on what we need to have in that. If people do go out with you or go with some of the other guides that do that, is there a lot that you need to bring, or is it mainly you're just going to need your good ice fishing suit and some warm boots and gloves? Is that about it, or what else do you need?
If they come fishing with me, all they need is some warm clothes. We have everything else. You just basically show up with some warm clothes, bring a snack or something for the afternoon if you want it. But a lot of times we got a barbecuer out there, and we'll fire up some bratwurst or something like that in the middle of the day. And I don't know what it is about a bratwurst out on the ice, but it is the best. It's the best food you'll ever eat in your life.
So, anything else, Don, before we go?
No, I think we covered pretty much all of it. I can't really think of anything else. The biggest thing every time you go out ice fishing, it's safety is the first thing and catching fish is second. So just keep that in mind.
Amen to that. All right, folks. Well, until we meet again, and we're going to have a lot more. This is just our second stop in our series of ice fishing previews. So we'll have more as we continue on and cover different parts of Montana. In fact, I think next up we're going to be covering West Yellowstone. They got a big tournament coming up in that. So, but we'll keep you posted and all that, so you can get a good preview of all around Montana where are the best places to go. And you're going to learn, just as you did here with Don, you're going to learn lots more. So until we talk again, be safe out there and be good to each other. We'll see you next time here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for watching the Montana Outdoor Podcast. There's no way we could do this podcast without the incredible support of sponsors like Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock, high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And of course, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss snowplows and accessories, and Diamond Sea Trailers and Accessories. Go see them on the web at rmtte.com. We'd love to hear what you thought of this week's podcast. When you get a minute or two, shoot us an email and tell us your thoughts. Same goes if you have any questions for Rigger or this week's guest. Just send your questions or comments to downrigger@montanooutdoor.com. Hey, don't forget we should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, gang, we hope to see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.